Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Polarizer Podcast. My guest today is B. Jeffrey Madoff. He's a director, writer, and professor from New York City. And he also is the founder and CEO of Madoff Productions, which is a film production company that makes amazing content. And they even won a Webby Award for their online videos for Victoria's Secret. So that's very cool. And Mr. Madoff is a very interesting guy who has had a couple of very interesting careers. One of them being a clothes designer, and after that, he became a film director. And he wrote a book about how to make a living with your ideas. The book is called Creative Careers: Making a Living with Your Ideas. And we've had a very nice talk about how to make money with your creativity, which is one of the most difficult things in the world. There's nothing more common than the stereotype of the starving artist, and this book is exactly about that and how to actually make a living making your art and being creative. But first, before we get into that, I will tell you about who sponsors the show. First up is Amazon, and you can buy the book on Amazon, by the way. So if you listen to the show and you click the link on thepolarizer.com or click the link in the show notes to the book, you will land on Amazon through our website, and that will give us a little kickback if you actually buy the book or anything else on Amazon, but I highly recommend you buy this book. So that's sponsor number one. The second one is Alert. Alert is an allergy app for people who travel. There's not a whole lot of traveling going on right now because of the whole corona thing, but it looks like that's sort of winding down a little bit, and I'm sure within a couple of months, maybe a little longer than that, we'll be able to travel again. And if you happen to travel and you happen to deal with a food allergy, this app can help you with that. So let's say you travel to, let's go to Poland today. Let's go to Poland, and you're allergic to dairy, peanuts, and tree nuts. You can just select that on the app and then select Polish and press the button, and it generates a allergy card for you for the allergies that you selected in the language that you selected. So it's a dynamic allergy card generator, and it's very handy if you travel frequently to different countries with different languages. Alert, spelled A-L-L-E-R-T, on the iOS App Store, or go to alertapp.com for more information. The app was recently featured in the food allergy magazine of the Netherlands, so that's kind of cool. So that, people are talking about this app, so you should check it out too. Tell your friends who are allergic about this app. Just tell them about Alert, A-L-E-R-T, in the iOS App Store. And last but not least, this podcast is sponsored by Onnit. Onnit is a health and fitness juggernaut dedicated to delivering total human optimization to its vast consumer base of athletes, thinkers, fitness gurus, and entrepreneurs. Through a wide array of products and supplements, Onnit combines cutting-edge science, earth-grown nutrients, and time-tested strategies to help people reach peak performance. Whether you are climbing mountains or biking down them, building businesses or closing sales, chasing personal records in the weight room, or running a marathon, Onnit is the brand you want to have in your back pocket. As one of the fastest growing health and fitness companies in the world, Onnit refuses to bring anything but the very best to market. Whether it be energy bars, protein shakes, creatine, or their flagship product Alpha Brain, Onnit's diverse lineup of products and supplements are backed by science and research. You can save up to 10% off by visiting onnit.com and using the promo code Polarizer. That's Polarizer, Polarizer. Use that on checkout on onnit.com to get 10% off. Without further ado, Mr. B. Jeffrey Madoff.
Where are you located, Diederik?
I'm in Rotterdam, the Netherlands.
I haven't been there for a long time, but I have actually two friends. How far is that from Amsterdam?
About 1 hour south.
I have two friends that one who moved back there, and another who moved there.
Okay. What brought them there?
The one who moved there, he and his girlfriend, he got a job at, NextWeb.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's based out of Amsterdam. Okay. They're a global group. And so he went there. He's actually from Australia, and then he lived in New York. Then he moved back to Australia, then to Amsterdam. And the other one, Justin Halsall, who started his own really unique video technology that he's getting funded. He had worked for IBM as an ambassador. These are both, guys that I had met through other friends, really good people. Middle 30s guys. Justin and his wife just had a baby. So I think going back was also getting some support, for his wife and himself having a new kid.
Right.
And he was starting his own company, left IBM and was starting his own company. Wow. And so that was cool.
Starting a new company right after having a kid. That's a pretty bold move.
Yes, it was. I think I'm going to do a change here. Wait a second.
Oh, here we go.
that looks better. Or I could just go, into deep space if you like. That could be also. That's kind of what if you could put a lens into my forehead, that's probably what you would see inside at this point.
There's a lot of stuff in there then.
A lot of stuff in there. Sort of, random firings, but yes, lots of stuff.
Very cool photos.
And do you play you play guitar?
Yeah. I have for a long time, but just for fun. I mean, I dreamt for a little bit of becoming a rock star, but it just never happened. Maybe I should have read your book.
What guitar players do you really like?
I got started with let's see. I first really listened a lot to the Offspring, punk, and that's easy to play. So that's how it's more punk rock. That's how I got into it, and then I became a big fan of Guns N' Roses, and eventually Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, and tried a little bit of Jimi Hendrix, but that was a little bit. I always found that a little bit tough. Just a classic rock. ZZ Top, I love ZZ Top.
Well, they get into just such a good groove.
Yeah. And it's just three guys, and they sound huge.
Have you ever heard Dweezil Zappa?
Dweezil Zappa, no.
So his father was Frank Zappa. If you ever heard of him, who was astounding and an incredibly innovative guitar player and an astounding composer. And Frank died in the early 90s, pretty young. I mean, he was like 52 when he died. Dweezil is probably one of the most, I've heard lots of guitar player. I saw Hendrix's first American tour.
Really?
When he did the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it was, because everybody else, when they got feedback from their amps, would turn their amps down and move away. And he said, I'm going to play this shit, and Zappa, Frank Zappa's, when I asked, what is music? He said, any sound I can control. Right. Which I love that answer.
You actually talked to Frank Zappa. So
I had, not long, but a friend of mine back when I was in college produced a Zappa concert. And since he knew I was such a huge fan, he said, do you want to introduce them? So I got to meet them and then introduce them on stage. So that was fun.
Oh, wow.
And, but Dweezil, his son, is one of the most astounding guitar players I've ever heard.
Really?
So you should check him out. He's phenomenal, and he rocks the shit out of it. But he's so good.
Dweezil,
he's just amazing. Yeah, Dweezil, Dweezil.
Okay.
And he's amazing.
Right.
I've seen him in person, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 times. He's unbelievable.
Right, I'll definitely look that up. What is your opinion of Captain Beefheart and his magic band?
I love Beefheart.
Yeah.
I never saw them live, but so one of my favorite cuts of all time. Are you familiar with Beefheart?
I know Trout Mask Replica.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest.
So,
it's so weird and uncomfortable to listen to, but yet you cannot not, if it's, I don't know. I don't even know how I would describe it.
well, he's got a voice like that, like he gargles razor blades.
Yeah.
And I was at a party. God, this is probably 35 years ago. And I'm talking to a couple of other guys and we're talking about music. And so I mentioned one of my favorite cuts of all time. Note this down. This is awesome, especially if you like, Zappa produced Beefheart.
Yeah. That's why I mentioned him. Yeah.
And so there's one of Frank Zappa's best albums is called Hot Rats. It's astounding. Yeah, it's astounding. And my favorite cut on that is a song called Willie the Pimp.
Willie the Pimp.
And yeah. And Willie the Pimp is, Beefheart singing.
Okay.
And the words are great. Yeah. The words are great. And Zappa's guitar playing is just off the charts cool. And he was amazing. So anyhow, I'm at this party and I'm talking to this guy and we're talking about that cut. And he said, so you heard Beefheart's group? And I said, oh, yeah, I've got all their albums. I love their stuff. I said, their guitar player, I don't know how else to say it, but it's like he's playing in a tilted room. Everything is off, but it all works. It's just so cool because it's just so weird. I love it. And he had broken into this big smile. Said, yeah, you really like his playing? And I said, yeah. I think he's winged eel fingerling is what they called him. And he goes, yeah. He said, that's me. And I said, no shit. And he said, no, it's me. And that was him. And I'm blanking on his real name, but that was actually him. So that was just funny. And I ended up talking to him about playing with Beefheart.
What kind of guy was he? Was he like a weird dude, or was he?
No, he was he's one of these musicians.
Right.
That his playing was so out there, and the way he approached music was so out there that since Beefheart's band, which has been a long time now, he does his own stuff. He still records, and he does his own stuff, and it's cool. It's out there. It's not background music.
No.
It's not foot tap music. It's just these soundscapes and raw, ragged guitar. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And if you listen to it, like people who are not into music would think that it's just a bunch of random noise, but if you actually listen to it, they're playing a bunch of interesting stuff, but they just mix it together in a weird way. And yeah, I can listen to it every day, but it's very interesting to listen to as a fan of music,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's like Beefheart did one of my favorite Christmas carols. and he has a song,
Merry Christmas.
Well, it's there ain't no Santa Claus on the evening train. Ho, 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 ho. Yeah, I love it. So
funny.
Beautiful Christmas carol. Beats the shit out of Silent Night. It's really good.
So what's your favorite or pick one of your top 5 favorite musicians?
Zappa.
Zappa's in there, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's probably in terms of modern or contemporary musicians, yes, because he's the only musician who's both in the Jazz and Rock Hall of Fame.
Really?
And yes, and he also recorded a lot of classical music.
I didn't know
classical
that.
music. Yeah, and it's always being played, especially in Europe. His classical music didn't catch on as much in the United States. But if you get Hot Rats, which I would strongly suggest, download it, because you're in for a treat. It's just mind expanding music because it's just so cool and so innovative. And although Hot Rats was recorded like 51 years ago or something, it's timeless because it's just the music is just so innovative. So there's classical sounding stuff, there's jazzy stuff on there, and then there's stuff that's almost like a soundtrack. You know, he just did amazing work.
Yeah.
So he's probably my, you know, the old, if you could only choose one person's body of work on the desert island, whose work would you take? For me, it would probably be Zappa.
All right. I'm ashamed to say that I don't really know much of him, so I better get into it then. Yeah.
I don't know if you better, but I think you might enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a moral imperative, but it's certainly something I think you'd enjoy.
Yeah.
Are there any areas of the podcast, or we're already recording and we have the first 10 minutes, which is discussing Frank Zappa?
Yeah, I guess I figured, like, you know, we might as well just keep going. I enjoy these kinds of conversations, and generally, the show is not super structured. You know, we beforehand, I just kind of talk about, like, all right, what do you want to talk about, and then we just kind of roll into it. And I'm fine with talking about Zappa before we talk about the book. When I saw your book pop up on Amazon, I just kind of Googled your name, and I was like, well, you know, this looks like a very interesting. This looks like a book I'd be interested in. So let me look into who's behind this, and then I found this media company that makes these amazing videos, and that's your you run that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, you know, since you have such a strong first impression, I probably shouldn't fuck it up by. So we'll just say thank you to your listeners, and it's been great talking to you. Just listen to Diederik talk about what a great person I am, and so I'm sorry. What was the question?
I'm just curious about your the media company that you run, that you pilot, that does the Victoria's Secret videos
and music videos, actually. Also, it's called Madoff Productions. An amazing coincidence that it's the same as my last name, and I had a fascination with. I've always had a fascination with film, and I had an opportunity. I guess I'll go back in time a little bit. Is that, you know, initially my first adult career was when I was about 20, 21, somewhere around there. I started designing clothes, and that happened by accident.
How does that happen by accident?
Yeah, it's well, what happened was I was working in this little boutique, and I did the buying for it, which meant that I would go to New York. The store was in Madison, Wisconsin, where I went to college. And I'd go to New York to try to find unique stuff. The owner of the store was only a couple, 3 years older than I. So, you know, it was a very interesting, eclectic little store. And since Madison was a very big college town with a big population of students, it was a major stop for all the touring rock bands. Oh, yeah. And so I would find cool stuff, and the bands would come into the store to buy stuff. And one day, a dear friend of mine called me up and said, "Can you think of a gig that would earn more than bank interest?" And I said, well, I see what we sell, and I, could always draw. So I said, I'll start a clothing company, having no idea what I was talking about. And he said, okay. And he sent me what was at the time more money than I ever had at one time. And that was a whopping $1,500. And I started a clothing company. And in spite of my ignorance, the company was doubling every 3 or 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And so within a couple of years, I had 110 employees, an office in New York, 2 factories going, and, had grown the company substantially. And, that was a chapter in my life that was quite interesting because I learned an awful lot. And the main thing that I learned, without going deep into my fashion history, was that I found when I made the transition into film, and the way that I made that transition was kind of the same offhanded way that I started my first career in fashion. My second career being in film started in similarly offhanded way. And that was meeting some people who were making a movie. And one of the people that I bought fabric from, his son was getting involved with some people to make a film. And he said to me, do you know anything about the movie business? And I said, not really. I mean, I love film, but I don't really know anything about the business. And he said, well, you're a smart kid. You got a good head on your shoulders. My son's your age. Would you mind meeting him? I said, no, I'd be happy to. And in meeting him, that ended up facilitating a transition into the film business.
How old were you at the time?
24.
Wow. And
I think 24.
Wow. So
and
before you were 25, you already ran a company with 110 people.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yes. Well, I also learned what I don't want to do, which is run a company with 110 people. Because what happens is, and I'm not going into all the details, just in the interest of your listeners and your time, but I had a very good financial backer, because my business was growing so fast that I needed financial backing. And a very good man in Wisconsin was my backer. And he said to me, I told him I wanted to move to New York. After being in business for about 2.5 years, 3 years, I knew I had to be where things are happening. And things weren't happening in Footville, Wisconsin, which is where my factory was, outside of Madison. I wanted to be around people that were doing stuff, and where there was an energy. I'm a stimulus junkie, and so I got to the point where I wanted to move to New York, and my backer said, "Look, I invested in your company because you provide employment for Wisconsinites. They bank at my bank. And if you move to New York and move the base of the business there, I'm not going to continue to back you." And that wasn't unreasonable. He had stated his reasons for backing me from the beginning. But what I was, clear about was that I needed to move on. And I wanted to be around. I was a novelty, being a young person who had started a business in Wisconsin, and I wanted to be around other people who were doing exciting and interesting things. And I made the decision to close the business and move to New York, without a job, without a place to live, without knowing anybody or knowing what I was going to be doing. But that sense of adventure, moving to a city like New York and doing something, as opposed to scaring me. Because, so many people said, "You're moving to New York?" Yeah. "Do you have a job lined up?" No. "Do you have a place to live?" No. "Well, do you know anybody there?" No. "Well, aren't you afraid of what's going to happen if you move?" I said, "I'm actually afraid of what's going to happen to me if I stay." I was ready for something different. And I had saved up enough money that if I lived very modestly, that I could last for about a year. And I was traveling a lot and living in different parts of the city. And then I ran out of money. So I started another clothing company and then sold it. And during that time is when I met these people who were making a film. And that was an interesting group of people. The person who was directing the film was Dennis Hopper, if you ever knew who he was. But Dennis Hopper, I guess to most people, was famous for being in the classic film Easy Rider, right, which was a neat movie, but he was also in Blue Velvet. And he did a lot of stuff. He was also in Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean.
Right.
And and he was in Apocalypse Now with Marlon Brando. Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Interesting guy. And I just had this strong intuitive feel for the medium, and decided after getting some exposure to it that that's what I wanted to do. So I taught myself how to shoot, taught myself how to edit, taught myself how to light, and do all the things that were necessary to become a filmmaker. And, it's kind of how I did the fashion business. I didn't know anything about it. I was self-taught in terms of how to design and manufacture and do all that kind of stuff. And the thing that was probably the biggest impact was businesses are more alike than not alike. And putting together a line of clothing and designing it and manufacturing it and selling it and getting paid for it and all that is the same thing as making a movie or making a commercial. You have to have an idea, sketch out the idea in film. It's called a storyboard. You have to organize what labor you need to make it happen. You have to know what materials you need along with that labor to make it happen. How much is it going to cost you to do it? Is there a market for what you're doing? How are you going to distribute it and get it out there? And so I found that actually everything I had done in fashion, it wasn't like I was starting over. The same knowledge base that I had built up in terms of process and protocol in the fashion applied directly to making films. It was literally the same protocol. Communicate an idea, cost out the idea, distribute the idea, get paid for the idea so you can do more ideas. And as I have found, that's true in every business. And so it helped me kind of decode what doing business was. When I realized these things aren't dissimilar, they're very much alike. I mean, it's certain jargon separates them, but again, the protocols are very much the same. So getting into film was a natural transition for me. And I love doing it, and have had the great fortune of working with wonderful people, and have, traveled the world and done all kinds of stuff. And it's really fun. And what I found out about myself is that aside from not wanting to manage lots of people, like when I'm a director on a set, I've had crews of over 120 people. And it's broken down into subcategories. But the point is that there's people that you depend on to get things done. So management, collaboration, all those things come to play no matter what kind of business you're doing. If you're running a dental clinic, you've got a bunch of dentists to manage and everybody's billings and all of that kind of thing. And again, so many of these things are the same no matter what you're doing. But what I discovered about myself, and I was fortunate to discover this when I was quite young, is I love the process of actually doing it. The doing is what's fun for me. Being in production is what's fun. Business is a knowledge of business is a survival tool for me. It's not something that, I love the business of the business. I don't like the business of the business, but I know how to do it.
I think that's true for most creative people. And I think that's also why it's difficult for a lot of creative people to make money or make a career out of their creativity, because But
see, I think that's a myth.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right, but I think it's a myth. And here's why, it's a myth. Is because there's lots of very creative people that are very smart business people. And, I go into this in my book. There's a whole idea of, I'm right brain, I'm more spatially related and creative. Left brain is much more organized. And so I'm really a right brain person. Well, that is also a false dichotomy. There is no such thing as a left or right brain person. The person who did the initial studies on that, neuropsychologist Roger Sperry, won the Nobel Prize for his study in split brain research. And that's where the whole idea of left-right brain happened. But it was just a few years after he won that award, which I think was in 1991. What was discovered is brain mapping became much more sophisticated in the next few years. And what was realized is there's a tremendous amount of crosstalk that happens between the two hemispheres of the brain. And so you could look at the brain of a painter and you could look at the brain of a dry cleaner, and it would be essentially the patterns were the same in terms of the crosstalk between the two hemispheres of the brain. And there is no such thing in reality as a left or right brain person, even though that myth somehow still exists. And you can, if you go online and search left brain, right brain, there's all kinds of books on it. There's all kinds of quizzes you can take. What kind of person are you, left or right brain? And it's all bullshit.
What if you?
There's no.
Oh, sorry. What if you compare a painter to an economist or something? Is it still the same story?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot distinguish a person's traits or occupation by looking at their brain.
Okay.
There's crosstalk between those two hemispheres. And so a lot of creative people are bored by business, or a lot of people disqualify themselves saying, I can't do business. So then what you need to do is either hire or partner somebody that does, because if you don't, you're not going to survive, or you're going to be taken advantage of. So you need to know that, and business is a survival skill. Now, I know people that find the business of the business really interesting. I don't, but I know how to do it, and I have to know how to do it because that's how I survive. And any creative, if they want to survive, needs to know, even if they're in a fortunate position of being able to hire people to do that part of their business, if they aren't aware of the business, there's a really high likelihood they'll get screwed over. And that's just the world. And those stories are legion, especially in the music business.
Oh, yeah.
But those stories are legion in all business. How these people made so much money, it seemed, but they ended up getting ripped off for so much money. It's not an uncommon story. And so a knowledge of business is important because it is a survival skill.
And this is what this book is about, I assume.
Well, that's a good portion of the book is yes, because most people have the attitude that they're one or the other. And as a matter of fact, when we were trying to sell the book, when my agent was trying to sell it, we first went to one of the major business book manufacturers or publishers, and their response was, why would business people want a book about creativity? Total disconnect. Why would they want it? Then we went to one of the major psychology and self-help books publishers, and their response was, why would creatives want a book about business? And they didn't get it. And then we went to Hachette, and Hachette's one of the largest publishers in the world, and their editor, Dan Ambrosio, said, we love the idea of the hand-in-glove relationship between business and creativity. Nobody's done this. This is a great idea. We love it. And they bought the book. And they got it, which was what was so gratifying from my end, because I have seen so many businesses fail because of the attitude that, well, I'm creative, I don't know business. And again, you need somebody to complement your knowledge. And there's certain things you just need to know, or you're going to get screwed.
Right.
It's not a terribly kind world out there in a lot of fronts. And so, you want to surround yourself with the best people, but you also want to surround yourself with a certain knowledge. because that knowledge can armor you against some of the issues you might have.
So the biggest pitfall is for people who are creative. They just kind of ignore the business part because they tell themselves, I'm creative, I'm not a business person, so I'm just going to be creative and leave it at that.
Right. That's right. And the stories are legion and legend of all the people that have had tremendous talent, but couldn't sustain their business. And to me, a knowledge of business is how I can keep doing what I love doing.
Right.
And so that, to me, in and of itself, is a good enough reason to learn some business, or at least know what I don't know so I can seek the right kind of help to keep my business going.
Right. Well, you're also a photographer. And if you were to turn that into a successful business, how would you go about that?
Well, first of all, I'm a director, and I do photography, and sometimes the photography is a part of the work I do, but I don't really sell myself as a photographer.
Okay.
But the question is still a valid question. How do you do it? And the main thing that you have to do, whether you're a musician, a director, a writer, a photographer, is that you need to give people a reason why to buy your work over somebody else's.
Right, because there's endless work out there.
That's right. And now everybody that has a phone thinks they're a photographer. Yeah. And they're not. It's just like everybody with a laptop thought they were an editor, a film editor. It's interesting. Years ago, I was interviewing for an editor position. I was interviewing people, for my company. And this guy came in and he said, yeah, I know Final Cut and I know Avid and I know all the software. And, I looked at his reel, which normally I've done in advance, but somehow he got through. And I looked at his work, which sucked. It was really bad. He knew how to work the equipment, but I didn't care for his work at all. And I said to him, I'm curious, if you knew how to type, would you consider yourself a writer, an author? Just because you know how to work the equipment doesn't make you an editor. You need to know what you're doing.
What did you say?
You enjoy playing. I didn't say anything. And, it's like you enjoy playing guitar, but you do it for your recreation to kind of cool out and just for your own enjoyment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, I'm
I'm halfway decent, but yeah, I'm not playing stadiums,
Right. I'm just saying, the difference.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And I think there's a lot of people these days who don't know the difference. They think that if they take a picture on their phone, they're a photographer. If they know how to use the software, they're an editor. Right. And that's not the case. And it takes a long time to get really good at what you're doing. And so back to your question, if you're a photographer, how would you make a living at it? You've got to, first of all, not only offer something up that's distinctive, because as you said, there's so much stuff out there. You also have to get it out there, and that's another challenge.
Yeah.
It's like if you have a film and you don't get it distributed, no matter how good it is, nobody's going to see it and it's not going to happen and you're not going to make money. You're not going to get money for another film. If you release a record and, or nobody downloads it or nobody buys the vinyl, you're not going to last long as a musician unless you have money coming in from other sources. And the same thing with photography. You've got to have a signature, like in all the other arts. You need to have a signature so that what you do makes you distinctive and people seek you out.
Right.
And that's and the hardest thing now is separating yourself from the crowd.
Yeah. How
do you make yourself just?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. How do you get your work out there? Because even if it's really good, people are not going to see it or find it. I mean, because there's I don't know how many people are on Instagram these days. Although I don't think Instagram's necessarily the way to do it. Do you have to go out into the real world to print it and try to get it into galleries, or
well, it also depends on your goal. What kind of photographer are you? Are you doing portraits for people, or are you doing fine art that you want in galleries? Are you doing things that you want sold? What kind of, who is your market? And that's something you have to know in every business. If you hope to make a business out of it, you can't be the only one that loves your idea,
right?
Because it's not good enough, to make it. So you have to do what in business is called proof of concept. What I did when I started designing clothes, the first few dozen shirts that I designed and had made, I put in that little store where I worked, and they sold out really fast. So I knew there was a market for it. And then I put together a bunch of samples and strapped them to my motorcycle, drove to Chicago, went to 18 stores, and 15 of them bought. So I knew people were going to buy what I was designing.
Right.
So you need that proof of concept to know that people are going to buy it. And, there's a wonderful artist, Zaria Foreman, who I interviewed in my book. And I said to her, what was it like when you sold your first piece of art? How did you even know what to charge for it? Because that's a big question, right? Why is some people's work cost so much and others so much less?
Oh, wow. She makes pastel drawings.
Are you looking at like the icebergs and stuff like that? Yeah, that, how she does that?
Oh my God, that's amazing.
With her fingertips.
Wow.
Those are actually done with her fingertips.
Wow.
And they're like photo real.
That's crazy.
Her work's astounding. Yeah, isn't it amazing work? And do you see how big it is?
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. Her work's astounding. So,
but that's a
when
unique
she was
talent right there.
That's right. That's right. And so unique that actually NASA hired her to go to the North Pole in the Arctic with her so that she would do creative renderings of things. Because she also, through her work, tracks climate change.
All right.
So anyhow, I said, so that first time that somebody wanted to buy a piece of your art, how did you know what to charge for it? She laughed and said, I had no idea. So I went around and, because of the size of the painting they wanted, I went to some galleries, looked at stuff and thought, well, it's a painting. It's about this size. And here seems to be kind of the cost for paintings that size. And so charged $5,000 for the painting. And I said, how did they respond? She said, they bought it right away. I said, wow, that's cool. And how did you feel? And she said, well, first I was just stunned that they bought it. And I said, so how long ago was that? And she said, about 10 years ago. And I said, and so how much would that painting sell for now? And she smiled and said, over 100,000.
Right.
So everybody is reluctant to sell their work because they don't know how to price it. They don't want to price it too high, so they lose the sale. They don't want to price it too low, so they feel unhappy with it, but they still want the sale. And so that's also a business calculus that you have to make.
Right.
Because it's not just the value of the painting, it's the value of maybe being in the right living room or the right gallery or whatever, where other people can see it and want your work, and you can raise your prices as you go. But you got to start someplace.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. It's I'm still just amazed by that art. It's very beautiful.
That's the cool thing about my class is I actually saw her on a TV show, CBS Sunday Morning, and which is a great show. And so they did this segment on her, and then they said her gallery was in Brooklyn. So I sort of tracked down her gallery and then communicated with the gallery manager because she's successful now. I'd never heard of her, but that doesn't mean anything. And wrote her an email about, this is the class I teach. I'd love to have you as a guest. And she thought the class sounded cool, and she did the class, and she's wonderful. And that's the great thing about teaching is, number one, I keep learning from the guests that I have, but I can reach out to people like that. And if they're kind enough and generous enough to say, sure, I'd love to do the class, they can impart the knowledge to my students, to me. And, I get to meet fascinating people as a result.
Yeah, you're also a teacher at a university in New York.
Yes, I teach at Parsons School for Design. And the course, Creativity, let me start that again. The course, Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas, is the basis for the book. I've been teaching this course for about 13 years, and I've interviewed a lot of really great people. And, I just wanted to reach a wider audience than just the classroom, because I think what these people had to say and the knowledge they had to offer was really special. And, I learn from them, and I also learn from the students. And so I'm a constant lifelong learner, because I have kind of insatiable curiosity about all kinds of stuff. And I think that's also an essential trait of creative, is you want to always keep increasing your mental palette. Go to museums, go to movies, listen to music, talk to new people, just diversify the range and type of people and work that you look at to constantly widen the berth of your knowledge.
Right. Okay. And I see you also, for this book, you also talked to Tim Ferriss, I see.
Yes.
That's what did he have to say about this?
Well, Tim's a very smart, interesting guy. He and I met just as his very first book, which launched his career, The 4-Hour Work Week. We met right when that was coming out. So he hadn't achieved the success that he was to achieve. So that was very early on. And, we met, and it was going to be for a half hour, and we ended up talking for like 3 or 4 hours about cognitive neuroscience and all kinds of things. And we just hit it off. He's a smart guy. And he's a smart guy who became a brand. Yeah. So he's somebody who, there's a large group of people, which you can witness by his podcast and the sale of his books. He's had a number of bestsellers now, are curious about what he thinks. Yeah. And what his insights are. So, Tim has been very successful in establishing himself in a certain niche that is proven not only to be lucrative, it's been sustainable for, we met 12 years ago. And, he's been able to build a really good career, and it's all on his ideas. So he was a natural to be a interview subject for my class, because he does make a living with his ideas.
If I look at the list of subjects, I haven't read the book yet because it's not out over here yet, but it's on Amazon in stock. It says, ask these vital questions that will help you determine your value. Be smart about your hustle, ruthlessly edit your creative projects, overcome fear and doubt, create a successful, long-lasting career on your own terms. There's some people I know who are also doing creative things, and some of them I can just tell, like yeah, I think there's something there, and some of them I think, well, I can see that you're trying, but I just don't see anything coming off that. Is that also in the book how to look at yourself in that way? Like, how do you know whether you got something or not?
Well, one of the key questions to ask yourself is, as I said before, am I the only person that thinks this is a good idea?
Right.
Am I the only person that thinks it's cool? And so you always want support from your friends, but you also want honesty.
Right.
And you also, though, if you can, you want to avail yourself of people that know what they're talking about. So, there's going to be people that will be very encouraging, but they have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
They don't know how hard it is to write a book.
Yeah.
How hard it is to get a publishing deal. How you have to, your work is nowhere near done when you've written the book. Then you got to promote it.
Yeah. How do you do that?
You got to do what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
You do podcasts, people approach you. You do podcasts. I've done radio interviews, articles. There's as much work after you've written the book if you want to get it out there. And by the way, I'm still learning. This is all new territory to me.
Right.
But it's, the work only begins once you have the book. And then you got to sell it. You got to make people want it. And there's 1 billion books out there. Why should people be interested in my book and what I've got to say?
Right.
And, I think because the book entertains and it educates and it inspires people. That's the feedback I've gotten. And those are worthy things. And, I believe in what I wrote. And I think that because I think there's really ideas that have value that I'm putting out there and am able to also share the insights of the range of people that you see that are in the book, I think that there's something really valuable there. And I think it's something great that people will benefit from and learn from. So it's worth it to me to go through what I have to go through to get the word out. Right. But, it's a lot of people, one of the big misconceptions, if you're a musician, we finished the album. Well, so that's only the beginning. Now you got to get it heard. You got to get people talking about it. You have to raise awareness so they even want to listen to it. And that's a whole other job unto itself. Once you're established, it's easier because people are anticipating what you're doing. So you have a built-in market already because you have that proof of concept. But initially you don't have that. So it's a lot of work just to try to build demand for it.
Yeah, and this book goes into that, getting over that first hurdle that seems so difficult.
Yeah, which is that you have to, first of all, you have to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, well, one of the reasons why the short intro and the cover spoke to me is because it kind of applies to everything that I'm up to. Like I just have a pretty good full-time job, but I've been making photos for 10 years. I've been working on a novel for like over 10 years, and I'm doing this podcast. And at one point I was thinking like, well, I'm doing all this stuff. I got like thousands of pictures on my computer, and some of them I think are pretty good. And if I show them to my friends, they think they're good. And I'm like, well, what am I doing with all this? I'm just creating all this stuff, and it feels better to do that than to watch TV or play Xbox or something with my idle time. But I'm like, well, but how am I gonna turn all this into something? Yeah, how can I turn this into a career? So when I saw that book, I was like, yeah, I gotta send this guy a message, see if he wants to talk to me, because this is very interesting. What's also kind of interesting is because my cousin, he's also he's a painter, and I saw him turn that into an actual career. And he has a pretty impressive gallery with some other guys. Like they work together, 3 of them, and they're kind of known in the city locally. And they were about to fly off to China to try to sell their stuff, but the whole COVID thing got in the way. So. But that was
got in everybody's way.
Yeah. Oh man. But that was just very interesting to see how a group of people manage to make it work. And so this is the kind of stuff they make. It's pretty intense, very colorful.
Yeah.
They also got this deal with BMW. It's like they painted a car for them.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So they're making things happen, and
that's neat.
Yeah, I sometimes just try to ask them like how do you guys do it? It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. We just paint.
Well, yeah, but their painting is clearly resonating with people. Yeah. I assume BMW paid them to paint the car, and so their work resonates. And again, you never know until you put it out there.
Yeah.
So all you do before you put it out there is everybody's speculating all the time, but you don't know until you put it out there. I have a good friend who is who's a fine artist. It's not easy to make a living off your creativity because there's so much competition for attention.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to be able to put your ideas across in a way that's compelling. So, your cousin's doing distinctive work and is discovered since he's sold work and even gotten some work sponsored, there's a market for it. How big that is, he's in the process of trying to discover that.
Right.
But it seems to be that there's clearly encouragement that there's a market for his art. And that becomes, whether it's art or whether you're making an article of clothing or a new app, the marketplace tells you whether or not people want it. But you have to get it out there effectively and build demand.
So step one is to actually do it and make it. And then step two is to actually try to get it in front of people. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you walked into a gallery or heard some music or whatever and said, oh, I could have done that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But what's the difference between you and them? They did it.
Yeah.
You're looking at it, So you've got to take that risk of getting your work out there.
And would you say that process has that process become easier or more difficult with the digital age and with phones and computers? And
well, I think it's easier to reach more people because the web has a global reach, but you're also competing against everybody else too. So, if I Googled painters, who knows how many thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions of people that would come up. So
you'll probably land on Rembrandt and Picasso. Like you'll find dead people first.
That's right. Yeah. Like many, many, many people first. But the point is, so yes, you can, I think it's easier to potentially reach a wider market now because of technology, but it's hard to get attention because there's so much competing for that attention.
Right.
And so there is no magical path. If anybody who says, oh, it's easy, all you have to do is these 7 steps and you've made it. It's just not true. But you can sell books making those claims, but it's, it's just not true. And, and I think probably your cousin's a good person to talk to because it's somebody, is it a he, your cousin?
Yeah. He's a super charming guy.
And so he's charming. He's doing interesting work. He's sold some pieces. He did a commercial sponsorship with BMW. How did it happen for him? He'd probably be somebody good to have on the podcast.
Yeah. I already talked to him a couple of times, but
Yeah, right. I mean, he did it.
Yeah.
He did it, or he's on his way to do it.
Right.
He's got some good positive encouragement early on, which is fantastic.
It's also interesting what you say is about if you walk into a gallery or see something and you would say, hey, I could do that. Have you ever heard of a photographer called Diederik? Australian guy. He sold the most expensive photograph ever for like 6.5 million for one photo.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like it's a photo of the sun shining into a canyon, and there's dust in the canyon, and it almost looks like a ghost. It's very, very pretty photo, and he sold it for 6.5 million. And if you if you look at all his photos, it looks, they're all good photos, but on forums and message boards, everyone just talks trash about him. It's like, yeah, it's all oversaturated pictures. It looks like the average Instagram gallery, but in the meantime, the guy's got galleries all over the world, and he's selling his work for crazy amounts of money. And so yeah, that's interesting to hear that comment from you, what you said.
Well, when you achieve a level of success, especially with social media where it is, trolls are bound to turn up.
Right.
People who are jealous of your success are bound to turn up. So people who trash you because you're doing what they'd like to do. And so instead of actually doing the work, they spend their time criticizing other people. And what's the benefit of that? I think that's really a shame, but that's how it often goes. So this guy, I don't know his work, but he's gotten tremendously successful, and it's not going to make those people any more successful to try to trash him. What's the point? But if you think you can do something better, do it and try and get it out there.
Right.
But it's a lot easier to sit on the sidelines and throw rocks at people than it is to put your work out there and see that it's not so easy to accomplish.
Well, putting your work out there also comes with a risk, because you're putting it out there open for criticism, and I think
that's right.
A lot of people are afraid of that too.
You're right. They are, but that's something that you have to get past, and you have to create a moat between you and your work.
Right. Because,
if they say, I saw Diederik's photography, it's shit. Who cares about his photography? Well, first of all, they don't know you. So they're not talking about you as a person. And they're trying to get at you by criticizing your work. But you, as the creative, have to understand that there is a distinction and a difference between yourself and the work that you put out there. Because otherwise it can be really hurtful, because there's some nasty people out there.
Oh, yeah.
And we certainly know that just looking at the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Boy. Yeah, really. That's right. So I think it's important, if you're a creative and you're putting your stuff out there, that you have to protect yourself, and you have to understand that there are people like that out there. And, I know a number of famous people, and I've asked, how do you cope with that? And they said, something, I don't look at social media.
Yeah.
And that's their response, because they know that a good percentage of it is just going to be that kind of hateful stuff. Yeah. And what's the point?
And quite a lot of people actually just live to rile people up, and if they just get a reply, then they're just mission accomplished. Yeah.
That's right. And to me, it's I would hope that people have a greater purpose in life than trying to tear other people down.
Right. Although if you look at Twitter, I try not to, but it's also just interesting. That's why I just log in every now and then. But it's just all negative. It's that makes me want to just get away from social media in general. And so if you're creative and you want to make that work outside of without using social media, is that still possible, you think, or is that just a bad idea to play it that way? I
mean, I think that you need to use whatever tools at your disposal that you think you can use effectively. And it depends on who you are and, where you're at. Are there some, are you in a position, for instance, to hire somebody to effectively manage your social media so you can get stuff out there on a regular basis, build a following so that people become familiar with your work? Doesn't mean you have to do it yourself, or you may not be in a position financially to hire anybody, but there are ways to get yourself out there, even when your financial resources are low. And that can be doing it yourself. That can be working with somebody who gets something else out of it. Like if you have with your photography, maybe you trade photographs, maybe you barter something. I mean, there are ways that you can work with people that can help you do things and extend their reach, or people who are trying to show that they know how to manage social media, and you can give them the chance to expose themselves and their work. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to build your own mini networks of support. It just takes time, but it can be done. It just takes time. But I think, these days it would be very hard to get that attention because you have to go where the eyeballs are.
Right.
So where are people looking? And that's where you have to go, where people are looking to do what you want to do.
Right. Oh, that's also interesting that you put it that way, because one thing my cousin did, like he managed to get a couple of his paintings in some restaurants. And I bet that he just made some kind of deal, like, get to hang my painting here and I eat a couple times here and you can have it, or something like that. I mean, I just made it up, but I can imagine him doing something like that. And, that's also a way to do it.
Something you can do with your photographs. Go to a coffee shop. Tell them that you'll give them X% of any painting that's sold.
Yeah.
And that they can choose their favorite one and you'll give it to them.
Right.
And use their walls as gallery space if they hadn't thought of doing that. I mean, I've seen that. That's not an original idea. I've seen this before. But there's ways, that's what I mean, of getting yourself out there and getting stuff seen. You don't know who's going to see it in that coffee shop or in that restaurant.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
That can lead to something.
So you get the ball rolling.
Yeah. And you don't really ever know what's going to work until it works.
Yeah.
So you just gotta try.
Back to the original idea, just get it out there.
If you don't get it out there, you got nothing to work with.
Right.
Then it's all just conversation.
Yeah. Okay. What's one big takeaway that you got from interviewing all the people for your book? One thing that you kind of just learned, hey, this is something I learned while working on this book and talking to these people.
I think the main thing, and I can't say I learned it, it confirmed my belief, is that probably the most important trait is perseverance.
Okay.
You just got to keep at it and you got to keep doing the work. There is no magic. I know lots of successful people, a traditional definition of success. I don't know any successful person that doesn't work their ass off. It's a lot of work, and it's work that you do all the time. Doesn't mean you never take a vacation or never take a break. But what it does mean is that you work really hard, and there's nobody I know that has achieved success without really working hard, unless they happen to be just born into money and don't have to do anything. But everybody that I know, whether they've started more traditional businesses or more what might be considered creative businesses, everybody works really hard. My friends that are musicians work really hard. My friends that are painters and writers work really hard. My friends that are, doing venture capital work really hard. Everybody I know that does well works hard. And I think the myth is, and I think that the myth is often that you don't, that somehow something happens and the hard work is over, and the hard work's never over, because if you're trying to sustain a career, you're always going out there and you're always having to work hard. And that's the thing that most people don't talk about, is that it's difficult and it's a lot of hard work. Mm-hmm. And because most people like to present a much more perfect image of themselves and their lifestyles. But the truth is, it requires that hard work in order to be successful.
Right. And it's not always going to be fun.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's correct.
All right. Well, is there one more takeaway that you want to share with my audience? Like one thing that you want to get out there? Like say, like, you know, if you're a creative person, besides like the hard work and perseverance and everything we talked about in the last hour.
Yeah, stay curious. Constantly avail yourself of new ideas. And I think that the more diverse your social contacts are, the more diverse your cultural contacts are. You know, you may be into rock music. Go to a classical concert. Stuff's lasted hundreds of years. Why has it lasted hundreds of years? You know, listen to the music. Always be learning. Always be educating yourself. Always be exposing yourself to new ideas. And that's absolutely critical. If you lose that curiosity, I don't know how you can be creative, because creativity is principally about solving problems. And solving those problems is, you know, how do I solve that? How do I do that? And so always asking yourself questions and always educating yourself and always being curious is, I think, absolutely critical.
All right. I think that's a great answer. Where can people find a book besides Amazon? Books named Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. You can, it's on Amazon. I'll put a link on my website as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you also said something about a LinkedIn group. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So the book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Google Books, ebook.com, all of those. And LinkedIn, I started a group called hashtag Creative Careers. And I just started that recently, and I'm hoping that it becomes an idea exchange place where people share ideas about creativity, put out questions about issues they have in terms of some of the things we've been talking about. And I hope that it gets a real robust dialogue going on among people and supporting people and their creativity. I have a website, which is acreativecareer.com. And that has clips from my class, extended clips from my class with the guests that I have. And then I also have an Instagram site at A Creative Career. And on there, you'll see short clips, because the full length on an Instagram clip is a minute. But there's short sound bites from a lot of my guests that are also, you know, interesting too. So between the book, the website, Instagram, and that Creative Careers group, you know, hopefully it inspires people and entertains them, because some of these people are just so interesting, and all of them have unique stories. And so you can get a sense of all of that. And of course, I hope people get the book, because I do believe, I've had people write to me and say that I just finished reading your book. I want to read it again. And this seems like something I can keep going back to, because at different stages in your career, you have different issues. Sometimes it's how do you get it out there? And that can be your first issue that you have to confront. But there's always along the road other obstacles. And the other thing I can say to your listeners is, don't think your problems are unique. And if you can find help from others who have experienced the same things, that might bring you some comfort and give you some ideas of how to cope with some of the challenges you may be facing.
All right. Well, thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure.
I really enjoyed talking to you. I learned some good things here, and I'm sure my listeners have too.
I hope so. Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you too. It's my first Rotterdam podcast.
Yeah.
So
long distance.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have the book ordered, and after I read it, maybe we can do it again. Maybe we'll have some more questions.
Great. And please post a review on Amazon, especially a 5-star review. It makes a difference.
I'll do that.
But if you hate the book, keep it to yourself.
Okay. That's also a good one. Is that also a tip that's in the book, like positive reviews only?
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you, Dieter. I really enjoyed it. It was very nice meeting you, and thanks for seeking me out.
Thanks for coming on. You know, it's not as big as the Tim Ferriss show or the big ones, so it's always just a real treat for me to get someone like you on the show. So,
well, you're very welcome. And they didn't start off big.
Yeah, that's
remember
true.
that.
That's true. So, well,
see, a few years from now, you won't even know who I am. Oh yeah, I think I interviewed Jeff years ago. I was just starting out. Now I'm a big important guy. I don't talk to anybody. You know, so
that'll be nice. Although, no, I won't forget about you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, it was an interesting episode, wasn't it? Thanks again for coming on, Mr. Madoff. And thank you all for listening. And don't forget to buy the book on Amazon. I got it linked in the show notes. So if you go to Polarizer.com and find the podcast in there, you can click on there and you'll find all the links to everything we talked about today, and including a link to the book on Amazon. And also visit Onnit.com, use the promo code Polarizer to get that 10% off, and download the Alert app from the iOS App Store, ALLERT, from the iOS App Store, your iPhone or iPad. And also sign up to the newsletter so you never miss an episode. And that's it. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Let's see.